Howdy, folks. Welcome back or welcome aboard. You are listening to the Doc Owen Show. We are extremely glad that you are here. I need to tell you a couple of things right off of the top of the hour here. First of all, we always have on a whiteboard in the Hilltop Studios a process, kind of a map that says, okay, we're going to talk about this, and then this, and then this, and they're little boxes, and they're connected by arrows, and it's real artsy kind of thing, and it helps us flow through the show. With less than a minute to go on the air, Uncle Bocce affectionately pointed out, we got nothing on the board. So if we lose our way and begin to talk about things that are really off the wall, you'll understand why. I did have to put something on the board just so we'd have it up there, and it says there's just the word random. I don't think it's going to go that way, but unfortunately it can, and that'll have to be the nature of the beast.
Like random process.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I feel like I should say is that we do absolutely zero advertising on the show. We don't take donations. We don't sell stuff. Now, from time to time on the podcast, that may or may not be true. Our friends at Spreaker, where we are hosted and they produce our app, etc., they add, I think, an ad at the beginning and at the end of the podcast, things like that, and we're working on either getting those removed or having them put in there when we want to put in there. But the reason I bring that up is because we are beholden to no one. Our information we dig out ourselves, and the opinions that are offered are strictly, actually, they're mine and Uncle Bocce's and Ima's, and they can, I mean, we've all got our own opinions, and we may or may not agree with each other all the time. I think that's important to point out, particularly for tonight's show. So there's a couple of random announcements that had to be done. I am joined in the Hilltop Studio tonight by...
I'm Monsieur Fire.
And...
Uncle Bocce.
Full house, ready to go, ready to rock
and roll.
We are all over the social media as Doc Owen Show. DOCOWENSHOW, all one word. You can find us on Facebook. Twitter's a great place. We're trying to ramp up our followers well beyond the 5,000 mark where we are, and that gives you an immediate notice, if you're a Twitter follower, an immediate notice of when we do a show, and you can tap on it right there and listen to it. So it's really a cool way of having a constant reminder. We have a blog that we are constantly working on. It will probably really blossom, and I'm thinking towards the end of this calendar year. Sometime, like October, November, December, I think there's going to be just a lot of things come together, and it's going to go boom. And people are going to be going, great blog. I can guarantee it. We have apps that are free, no charge, download, available to you on both the iPhone and the Android. And through the apps, you can listen to the show live, as well as listen to the podcast, as well as have access to all of our historical information and shows that we've done in the past. If you've, and you can listen to them 5, 10, 15 minutes at a time, however you wish. All right. We start this show in a very traditional manner, beyond what you just heard. This is now time to kick off what would normally be mapped out on the board. So Ms. Surefire always gives us a moment of inspiration that she has diligently dug out sometime during the week. Uncle Bocce gives us today in history. I'm assuming that he has one for us tonight. I didn't ask him because this is a random show. And then I close out that trio with a something of a leadership quote or a thought that we need to go with. So on that, Ms. Surefire, take it away.
And tonight's quote, as usual, I'm going to say that now because I really like this site, is that brainyquote.com, BRAINY quote.com. And this quote really speaks volumes to me personally. It's from a gentleman that most of us have heard of, Aristotle.
Woo. Yeah, go Ari.
Yeah.
Anybody with just one name is cool.
Right.
That's
right.
Okay.
Yes. He was an ancient Greek philosopher and scientist, and I really enjoyed in my associate degree program taking a class and learning a lot about him.
Good for you.
Good for you.
Yes,
for you.
very good. And his quote is, "Education is the best provision for old age."
Wow, that's one I hadn't come across. That's good.
Well, you're old enough. It's about time you did.
Yeah, right.
Sorry about that.
That's
Say
okay.
it, say it again.
Got
Okay.
this.
Say it again, Emma.
Education is the best provision for old age.
Boom.
It's true.
I'm a firm believer.
I'm a firm believer, too.
Okay, so what happened in history? Anything of note?
Well, actually, nothing happened today.
Okay, I'll take
Okay,
it. No.
but-
Oh, phooey.
But, so I thought I'd go forward and look what tomorrow had to bring. And guess what? It fits in with where we are, because we just talked about George Washington.
Well, now that we've got daylight savings time, what you're about to read us probably happened yesterday, so it's appropriate to do it today.
Okay. Okay. In 1795, George Washington signs the Jay Treaty with Britain. Remember, we talked about that last week.
Yeah.
Named after John Jay, who was the first Supreme Court justice.
Okay.
Okay, and then also on August 18th, 1920, yay for the ladies. Remember the ladies, as Abigail Adams said. The 19th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified when Tennessee became the 36th state to approve it.
Okay.
That's the right of women to vote. So,
1920.
you imagine that? It took them that long? Amazing. But, you know, America has a habit of correcting all of its wrongs.
Thank you, sir. We will
Go ahead.
We will absolutely get into that.
Yes.
That's why we have Trump now.
Thank you.
This is all good stuff, folks.
Yep.
Our leadership quote tonight comes to us from our friends at the Optimist Club. A little book they gave me called 250 Optimistic Quotes that I rely on from time to time. This one is from a fellow by the name of George Bernard Shaw.
I remember him.
And if you don't know who that is, Google it. I can assure you there's a Wikipedia page on George Bernard Shaw.
Yeah, we used to go out for drinks.
I bet you had to buy. So here we are. Mr. Shaw said, "We are made wise not by the recollection of our past, but by the responsibility for our future."
That is very apropos.
Not by the recollection of our past, but by the responsibility for our future. We're going to
Yep.
talk. We're going to
That's a
talk
good one.
down those.
That's
lines
deep.
tonight.
That is deep.
Before we dive into Uncle Bocce's brief, which is right now we are coursing ourselves through the former presidents of the United States, and we are on president number 2, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, but before we do that, just give you a heads up on the show. We do have a fabulous interview. As a matter of fact, we had a very long conversation with the deputy chief at the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, a fellow by the name of Harry Jimenez. And Mr. Jimenez actually spent over 30 years and retired from ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Yeah.
And where he was the special agent in charge here in San Antonio, which is basically pretty high up. It's as high up as you can get outside of Washington, D.C. We had an interesting conversation about sanctuary cities, illegal aliens, Senate Bill 4 here in Texas, etc. And so it was a long conversation. We're going to play the first half of it for you tonight, and we'll segue to the other half probably next week. And then, as time allows, we're going to talk about what I call Confederate Mania. All right, it's just upside down nutso, and you may or may not like what I have to say about it. You can also go to the Doco and Show archives to a show called that we named The South Shall Rise Again. that we did on June the 25th of 2015, back when there was all that hullabaloo over bringing down the Confederate flags.
Yeah.
All right? And so we're going to talk about Charlottesville and the removal of Confederate monuments after we've had our interview. So guess we better dive into it. What do you got to tell us about President number 2?
Okay, yes. That be John Adams, an interesting character. He had an estimated IQ of 142.5. Just for your own knowledge, you probably already know, anything 130 and over is considered genius.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, so he graduated from Harvard University.
That's why I always resented coming in at 129.95.
Yeah, right?
It's a communist plot because I'm short.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So he graduated from Harvard University, and upon graduation, he was offered a job, immediate job to teach. He thought, okay, I need a job. I'll go do that. Found out that wasn't his forte. He did not like being. His father wanted him to be a minister, and he said, Dad, no. So what did he do? He decided to be a lawyer, and he studied with a prominent lawyer in Worcester, Massachusetts.
So his
that's
dad
what he
wanted
became.
him to be a preacher, and he'd rather be a crook.
Yeah.
No,
well.
he became a lawyer. My
There
bad.
you go. There you go. Yes. Okay. Well, you know his name, John Adams. He had a couple of nicknames. One was the Colossus of Independence. Imagine that. And that was given to him by Thomas Jefferson because of his leadership in the Congress in 1776. John Adams was very, very much involved in what was going on. Okay. The other is the Duke of Braintree, which which gives another glimpse to this man. It was a sarcastic reference to his grandiose airs.
Okay.
So he was one of those kind of people. Federalist Party from Massachusetts. He grew up as a Congregationalist, which of course is Christian.
Right.
Okay. However, in later life, he rejected that and he became a devout Unitarian. A Unitarian is a church that does not believe in the Trinity. Okay.
Okay.
It believes in God. Period. So in that sense, he could not have been a Christian. Okay, because Unitarians did not accept Christ. Okay, so on that basis, he wasn't a Christian. But the important thing to remember about this is that all of his upbringing and his readings and his studies, I am convinced that if you want to know a person, read what they write, and it all comes out. And in his writings, he mentions all of the things that the Enlightenment and the Great Awakening brought for us. They're just in his writings. So while he may not have been a Christian, so to speak, he still had that same Judeo-Christian, ancient principles kind of education. Okay, so he had that knowledge.
Well, there.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Go ahead. All right. Yeah, he was born on October 30th, 1735 in Braintree.
He was a Scorpio.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if Unitarians accept that, but
Well,
anyway. And he died July 4th, 1826, at the age of 90, and which was an old age. And you know what his dying words were? His dying words were, "And Jefferson still remains." Guess what? Jefferson died on the exact same day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Both-
he didn't know.
Both July the 4th.
Both July the
It's
4th.
Very,
Yep.
very significant.
Right, Independence Day.
Yep.
Absolutely amazing.
Two signers of the Declaration.
Exactly. They had 6 children. And the election of 1796, it was a little bit different than the election of George Washington by far. By this time, Tennessee had become a state. So the number of electoral votes required to win, or the number of electoral votes available were 138. Well, guess what? Adams won. He needed 70 to win. Okay?
Right.
He got 71.
Okay.
Guess who came in second? Thomas Jefferson came in second with a score of 68, followed by Thomas Pinckney with 59. Now, one of the interesting things here is, Alexander Hamilton. Okay, he was our first Secretary of Treasury, another brilliant man, and he did not, even though he was of the same party, the Federalist Party, he did not like John Adams at all. He just didn't like him. Okay, so what he did is he worked in behind the scenes against John Adams.
Who did?
And this is Alexander Hamilton, because his pick was Thomas Pinckney. That's who he wanted to be president.
Ooh, I'm glad he lost.
Yeah, right. So the campaign, to say the least, was acrimonious. You have the Federalists on one side and the Democrat Republicans led by Thomas Jefferson on the other, both accusing each other of different things. It started already. Sorry, got too loud.
Okay.
Okay, so
wait, back up.
Yeah.
We gotta. You used a word, a big word, like
acrimonious.
How'd you know which one?
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Yeah.
It may have been that too. So what did you, so
it was a bitter fighting.
It was highly contested.
Yeah, it was highly bitter fighting going on and all that kind of thing.
I thought acrimonious was people that were scared of spiders.
Well, it could be.
Okay.
So the Federalists, they liked the idea of a strong central government, whereas the Democrat Republicans, they were more on the side of the French, and they were more for states' rights or strong states. So already they're banging heads against each other.
Right.
Okay. The Democratic Republicans said that the Federalists, they liked monarchism and aristocracy.
Everything the same color.
Yeah, I mean, it's not true, but they're politicians again.
Yep.
See?
Yep.
It started right away. Hamilton himself opposed Adams, as I said before. Okay, and I gave you the stats on who won and why they won.
Yeah, but they didn't add up, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, we'll get a calculator.
They didn't do long division back then.
Yeah.
Huh?
Now, Adams appointed his cabinet. This is the first time somebody added to the cabinet, because John Adams, he had his Secretary of State, was Timothy Pickering.
There were four.
There were four.
Washington had four.
Secretary of State,
right.
Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of War, and the Attorney General.
Okay.
Adams was very instrumental with the Navy. So he added the Secretary of the Navy to it, okay?
Yep.
Because he helped build the American Navy. He was pro-Navy all the way. His vice president, of course, was Thomas Jefferson. I'm not going to get into everything about him, because we'll talk about him in a couple of weeks.
Review a little bit for our listeners. His vice president was Thomas Jefferson.
Yes.
Because they did not run on a ticket back in that day.
That's correct.
So whoever finished first was the president. Whoever finished second was the vice president.
Right.
End of discussion.
Yeah, end of discussion. But that then you have a president and a vice president of two different parties and two opposing views.
That's okay.
Which is probably okay. I mean, George Washington accepted it.
Well, back in that day it was, because they were all on the side of the country. They just might have had varying opinions on how to get there.
Now, he appointed several people to the Supreme Court. John Jay, who was the Chief Justice under Washington, he offered to John Jay, but John Jay said, I don't want anything to do with it. He declined. So he turned to John Marshall, also a very famous judge.
Right.
And there was associate judges also that he appointed. One was Bushrod Washington, who actually was the nephew of George Washington. It
What
was
was
his
it?
brother's son.
What was his real name?
That was his name, Bushrod.
Oh,
That's not a nickname?
No, that's his name.
that sounds like that hurts.
That's his given name.
Great.
Okay. Now, of course, the first lady was Abigail. Her name was Smith. She's a study in her own, Abigail Adams, and someday we might have to do that. She was very well-read, possessed her own intellectual abilities. She corresponded much with Adams. She was a pragmatic thinker, and she was her husband's trusted confidant. So he would pass a lot of things to her. Okay. So, Adams, before he became president, did a lot of things. He had a bunch of diplomatic missions. One was as the minister to Britain. He was also the minister to the Netherlands. He was also envoy to France, along with Benjamin Franklin and Arthur Lee.
Wasn't he the vice president for Washington?
Yes, he was.
Okay.
He served 2 terms under Washington as vice
Right.
president.
That's okay.
And he did, but we talked about this, the Second Continental Congress, the First Continental Congress, and so
this guy was seriously involved.
he was, and like I said, if you read his writings, like the Novanglis
Right.
essays and other things. By the way, all of this stuff is being put out
On the blog.
on the blog.
Right.
Okay, so you can go out to the web page and you'll see it on the sidebar.
Yeah.
And all this information is out there. So if you want to read some more, it'll be there for you.
Yeah, I mean, when
Okay.
Bocce does his homework and does his research, he kind of combs through it and makes sure it's valid and not duplicate and that kind of stuff.
Correct.
You then post the links to that, on, the links to the research, right?
Absolutely, yes.
On the blog,
Yeah.
which is really cool. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Next, I'm Uncle Bocce, by the way, UNCLEBACI at tacoshow.com. And next week, we're going to look more at John Adams. We're going to talk about his domestic policy and his foreign policy and a few other things.
So we're not to the point yet of uprisings in the street because their candidate lost.
That's correct. They were a little more genteel back then.
There was some angst and some pushback, and it lasted until about 8 p.m. the next night.
There you go.
Okay.
So-
That's what I figured. I mean, somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. And,
There you go.
And they did it, and they moved on.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Because that's one of the things we're looking for in these events or whatever. We're gonna dive right into the conversation that I had with Mr. Harry Jimenez. If you weren't with us from the beginning of the show, Mr. Jimenez is the deputy chief of the Bexar County Sheriff's Department. He is unbelievably qualified to have a conversation on illegal immigrant sanctuary cities and the law, and how local jurisdictions could do and should work with immigration control, or ICE, because he spent over 30 years working for ICE before he retired and went with the Sheriff's Department. He was the special agent in charge here in San Antonio. So the guy totally knows what he's talking about. So before we're catching up on our time. So here is a conversation with Deputy Chief Harry Jimenez. We are pleasured this afternoon to have a conversation with the Deputy Chief of the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, a gentleman by the name of Harry Jimenez. We're going to... Harry, how are you doing? Say hello.
Doing fine. How you
Doing great. Okay.
Yes.
We're gonna because of Harry's unique background, let's put it that way. Before he came, and I didn't even he can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that before he came to the sheriff's office, that you had some experience with ICE, with immigration control. Is that a true statement?
Yes,
Okay.
it's Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Yes, sir.
Within the Immigration and Customs Enforcement,
Okay.
we fall under the Department of Homeland Security.
Yes.
And ICE, as is commonly
The
known,
acronym, right.
it splits in two different areas.
Okay.
The Enforcement and Removal Operations, which
Yes,
is
sir.
the Uniform Division.
Okay.
And then Homeland Security Investigations, which it is the investigative arm, the detective, as you may, special agents,
Plainclothes guys.
plainclothes guys.
Okay.
So I retire after 30 years with the government, with the federal government, as the deputy special agent in charge for Homeland Security Investigation here in San Antonio. 4 months ago, I retired.
Wow. No wonder you're having so much fun.
Having a blast with the First County Sheriff's Office.
Well, good. Then we ought to be able to answer some questions. I told, may I call you Harry?
Yes.
Okay, good.
May I call you Doc?
Please.
Absolutely.
That way they'll know who's talking. One of the we have, as the audience knows, we have talked to Bexar County District, and we've talked to basically anybody we could about a Texas bill referred to as SB 4, Senate Bill 4. And it has to do with sanctuary cities. It has to do with illegal immigration. It had, all of these things kind of entwined together. And as I told Harry, in real life, and you guys out there know, I'm very process oriented. I'm very point A to point B to point C to point D, and that's how you get things done. And there were some things up in the political rhetoric and in the back and forth, and this is good and that's not good, and the dealing with parsing out words in a legal document, et cetera, that were really not making sense. And so our friend Nico LaHood gave me the introduction to Mr. Jimenez, to Harry, and said, this guy knows. So we're going to lay it out there. And as a matter of fact, when I started telling him what we were going to talk about, you can't see the visual, but he had a stack of papers, which then became a series of papers, because I think Harry understands what I'm up against in
Yes.
terms of understanding.
Yes.
So take it away. I mean, how do we explain this to folks that they can understand?
So, Doc, because you're a process guy, SB 4 touches the ICE detainers.
Okay, right.
And at the center of the discussion, the spirit of SB 4 is, in simple terms, is
Please.
for when you have an individual that comes into a jail with a criminal record, with a criminal history,
Right.
and this individual doesn't have a legal status in the United States,
Right.
it requires the local law enforcement agencies to cooperate with ICE enforcement and removal operations
Okay.
if a detainer has been lodged against the person.
Which is a specific legal document.
Yes. So we're going to dissect this.
Yeah.
Immigration law is as exciting as tax law. So let's start with...
But let me tell you, it depends on how up close and personal you get to it. It can be exciting.
So what is a detainer? Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the enforcement and removal operations, traditionally issues a detainer to federal, state, and local or tribal law enforcement agencies.
Okay.
The detainer, what it does is provide the notice of the intent to assume custody of an individual once this individual finishes
Correct.
with the state or local charges.
Correct. Right.
That's what the detainer says.
Okay.
Because on the spirit of being a convoluted law, the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 287.7 of the of CFR, is what provides the authority for the ICE enforcement and removal officer to lodge a detainer. So, what is the detainer? The definition: an individual encountered by ICE ERO who is A, subject to or may become a subject to a request made by ERO to another law enforcement agency, meaning the feds to the state and locals, to continue to hold an individual up to and not in excess of 48 hours,
2 days, right.
following the completion of his or her criminal custody.
Okay.
Meaning, imagine if you may, Harry is detained.
Yeah.
I'm facing local charges for a felony.
Beating DACA.
I go in front of a judge. I go in front of a jury of my peers. I go through a trial. I'm found guilty. I serve my time. Let's say that I was sentenced to 5 years in Texas Department of Correction, right?
Yes.
And TDC.
Right.
At the end of my 5 years, it's found out that there's an ICE detainer lodge because they want just to hold me no more than 48 hours so ICE ERO officers can take custody of me.
Right.
And why do they do that? They do that because the ICE ERO officer asks for a alien temporarily to be detained or stopped, right?
Right.
So you have the Immigration and Naturalization Act, the INA of 1952, it specifies that you can derive U.S. citizenship by a plethora of ways,
Yes.
not only by birth,
Correct.
which is my case, right? So for an ERO officer to lodge a detainer, in my case where I serve my time and I'm about to be released, the ICE ERO officer may have information that discloses that I, in this example, I'm undocumented, I came here illegally into the country,
Right.
I have a final order removal,
Okay.
I'm pending ongoing removals for any of the felonies I committed in the past. By biometrics, meaning my fingerprints,
Right.
show that I might be my real name versus one name that I may have given to the local authorities.
Got it.
So that biometric matches my identity as an alien that is required to be removed. Or I voluntarily made statements that I said, I was not born in this country, I want to go home.
Right.
So that's, in essence, an ICE detainer.
Okay.
That's the short version.
Yes,
of
sir.
a detainer. And it wasn't that short.
Well,
Well,
no,
that's a
but
short
that's okay. Yeah, I get it.
Now, one thing that we have seen is that the fact that we're talking about an ICE detainer inside the confinement of the jails,
Yes.
a lot of people out there talk in terms of local law enforcement, state, county enforcing federal immigration laws. That is not the case. So,
I've made that perfectly clear. I mean, I've made that with the audience too. I mean,
but unfortunately,
we get that,
unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there.
absolutely, and the press is no help.
So when a detainer is lodged, the ICE official, the Enforcement and Removal Operation, or the Homeland Security Investigations, because in the detective side of the house, they are illegal aliens that victimize
Yes.
a lot of other illegals.
Of course, right.
So the ICE officer must establish probable cause to believe that the subject is an alien who is removable from the U.S.
Right.
before issuing the detainer.
Correct.
So what is probable cause?
Pay attention, folks.
Yes.
The ICE officer must do that.
Yes.
That can't come from a local authority of any kind. They
No.
don't have that purview.
No.
That's not part of their.
It's
right.
punitive language. Must.
Yes, sir. Yes,
So what the ICE officer must complete a warrant for arrest, which is a Form I-200,
sir. Okay.
or properly complete a warrant of removal or deportation, which is a Form 205,
Okay.
also commonly known as an administrative or a criminal warrant.
Got it.
So in essence, that's the main thing of the misunderstanding about ICE detainers and how they come to be part of SB4.
Right.
So
Okay.
is that clear as mud?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's pretty clear. So to back up into a little bit of common vernacular,
Okay.
another thing that is really challenging to understand is folks who are here illegally, illegal aliens. Somehow, that's not always enough. I mean, as far as a lot of people are concerned, they've broken the law right there.
Well,
But
yes.
but according to Nico, I think is the one that taught us that is that in itself is a misdemeanor. That it's not a felony. That it's not something that somebody can be picked up for.
Exactly.
If that's all they've done.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
And I go even more.
There you go. Thanks.
When you talk, in 2010, there was a law being pushed by the state of Arizona,
Okay. Yes.
and parts of that law were challenged in the Supreme Court, in the
Yeah.
Ninth Circuit, and then in the Supreme
It
Court.
went all the way up. Yeah.
And parts of the law were upheld, and part of the law were challenged and taken down, specifically the parts that stated that state, local, municipal, or county officers were not to enforce federal immigration laws.
Right.
First, because we don't have the tools, the databases, the training to enforce those laws.
Right.
Because you will have to compare the information provided by an individual in a routine stuff, if you may,
Yes.
to compare with biometrics of some sort. And absent of another crime,
Key phrase.
just the fact that you're in a country illegally is not enough for a state, local, municipal, tribal, or county law enforcement officer
Right.
to enforce that laws, because that's the job of the federal government. And that was the gist of the law. So,
And I'll add.
yes.
It's one of those things that every once in a while, when I'm on the radio, I have to say, whether I like it or not, here's the truth. So so to all of those people that are constantly, what is it about illegal that folks don't understand? Like it or not, it's a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
I mean, like it or not, until you raise the bar, however you intend to raise it on that offense. And that alone
Yes.
it is not. It's a traffic ticket
Yes.
In
Or a
effect.
citation.
or a citation
Or just a warning.
jaywalk. Exactly.
So Sheriff
Yeah.
Salazar.
So, like it or not, I mean those are the rules.
Absolutely.
Right.
And Sheriff Salazar has been very vocal about it. He's very clear
Yes.
when he tells everyone. Personally, he has feelings about the law. He has made it very clear.
We know-
He's a Mexican American.
We know that.
He has family members. He feels in his community. He wants
tough.
to do the right thing.
It's tough.
But at the same time, he has made very clear he's a law enforcement officer upholding the law. So until there is a decision that will make this ICE detainers something different by, for example, Judge Garcia in the federal court,
Yes.
or if there's any
Yes.
changes on SB4, which is coming to effect in a couple of weeks, we're going to uphold the law.
Right.
So my message out there is, don't find yourself in jail. Because that's the moment that somebody's going to ask, where were you born? And that's when you're going to have biometrics, because you're going to have fingerprints, you're going to have a way to identify the person. Now, in a simple traffic stop,
And SB4 doesn't really change anything about
absolutely
that.
not.
Right? I mean, that's
In essence, when you look at the Texas Senate Bill number 4, SB4, for example, if you have not committed a crime, regardless of your immigration status, and unless you are a subject to an ICE detainer, which we talked before, what is it? It was a probable cause.
Right.
You have absolutely nothing to worry about,
Right.
Even if you're in this country legally. Because, for example, during a traffic stop, simple traffic stop, If the deputy feels that he or she needs to ask immigration status of that person, they have that option. That's all. It just gives you the option. Just like they always had the option to issue a written warning, a citation, or arresting the person for whatever violation of law they had, independent.
Completely, it's
completely independent
right.
of their
Right.
of their immigration status.
Correct.
Also, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about this, some organizations, unfortunately, have created an atmosphere of fear. What happened with fear is when we allow fear to be the voice to our community, individuals that are not in the country legally, they'll pull back into the shadows. They hide, and then they're easier to be victimized by others, which many times, based on my experience as a Homeland Security Investigations Special Agent, are victimized by other illegal aliens
We know
in
that
the
happens.
country.
I mean, we know that happens.
So we don't want the
And we
culture
don't-
of fear. We
and
want
we don't like it
information.
any better than anybody else either, I might add.
So that's it's very sad that happened. But even when you look at SB4 is very clear about discrimination.
Yes,
The law prohibits racial profiling
Right.
on what we call the Big Five, right?
yes, sir. Right,
Race, color, religion, language, or national origin.
right.
So, in our case, Bexar County Sheriff's Office, looking at September 1st as the starting SB4, what we have embarked is into creating a training program for our deputies to be able to work with the community and ensure the community, and we've been trying in every Spanish media, English media, newspaper, radio, TV, if we have a victim or a witness of a crime, we don't really care what your legal status in the country is because we don't enforce federal immigration laws.
And actually, there's a protection for them that's available.
Absolutely. If you have an individual out there that doesn't have a legal status in the country, meaning is illegal in the country, there are venues to provide safe haven to these individuals. There is a significant benefit public parole.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We have, once you have somebody coming forward as a victim of a crime or as a witness of a crime, we can work with the federal entities, specifically with HSI,
Yes, sir.
which investigates this type of crimes for human smuggling, human trafficking,
Yep.
sexual exploitation, internet predators. But it could be just another crime that is not in the purview of HSI specific, but is within the elements of the law that state, local, tribal, municipal, and county law enforcement would enforce.
Right.
For example, rape. So that victim of a rape, for example, we can provide a significant benefit public parole. Also, we can provide a employment authorization, meaning now this person doesn't have to hide in
They
the
can
shadows.
come out of the shadows.
Come out of the shadows. They legally can work in the country. They can be in the country legally. There's a defer action,
Yes, sir.
meaning
Yeah.
your case on the immigration court has been deferred until this investigation completes.
Correct.
Now,
So it's the way I explain it
Uh-huh.
is it's our way of saying thank you.
Yes.
It's our way of encouraging assimilation, of encouraging cooperation, and it shows a major difference to me between United States law enforcement and perhaps the law enforcement that they're used to, which is not quite as open with the way they do their business.
and Doug, that's a great point.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as we enjoyed having the conversation. He is a very, very intelligent guy. He's well informed. We will do the second half of that conversation most likely next week, but we need to absolutely get on with the conversation that's going on around the world sparked by, well, I don't know about around the world, but certainly around the United States, about that was sparked by the incident in Charlottesville, Virginia. First of all, I am very, very subject to go off on a rant. That's why the show began with saying these are nobody's opinions but my own. And Uncle Bocce Endor, I may or may not agree. That I hope they'll chime in. The way I view, and I referred you to a show that we did in June the 25th of 2015, when all the mania was going around about taking down the Confederate flags, et cetera, et cetera. We had conversations with members of the Sons of the Confederate. We had conversations with a lot of knowledgeable people that have seen this going on and have been pushing back against this for quite some time. This being the rampant disregard for the history of the United States of America and the rampant stupidity of these dad-burn idiots that don't take the time to know what happened. And I for one am completely fed up with it. If you have no idea how infuriating it is. I mean, for me to be a patriotic American and that being equivalent to a Nazi, I dare you to tell that to me to my face. I mean, I will come off on you like a chicken on a June bug. You will not know what hit you. There will be no being nice and wading into a conversation. I'm just going to poke you in the face, and when you get up, we'll talk. I mean, it's just stupid. Yeah. Let me tell you something else. Think about this. Where else in the world have you seen destruction of historical monuments going on? Where else in the world have you seen people trying to wipe out the history of their neighborhood?
Communist China?
I'm thinking ISIS.
Oh, ISIS. Yeah, well,
I'm thinking, right up front and current day, people that we supposedly all despise the way they act are doing exactly the same, and these idiots are doing the same thing.
That's right.
I mean, there is just instance after, and I guess what bothered me the most about the way that the mainstream media and everybody else portrayed the incident in Charlottesville. If I may, and would you please remind the audience your favorite saying from Dinesh D'Souza, please?
Yes, Dinesh said it very good. He said, "You're entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts."
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
And this is one of those cases. All right? Mm-hmm. And the mainstream media, they presented opinions. They presented their total liberal bias, their total anti-Trump bias, as if it were facts. Mm-hmm. There was a group of citizens who had a rightful, authorized, predetermined permit to gather.
Yes, they did.
In support of not tearing down Confederate monuments. That's what it was. It was in support of our history. All right? They were not white supremacists. They are not Nazis. They are not KKK. They are patriotic American citizens that have simply had enough with the destruction of the history of this country.
Amen.
All right? And they were attacked by Antifa and Black Lives Matter and no telling who else, because they were running ads in Virginia newspapers on Craigslist for $25 an hour for protesters that would like to get involved.
Mm-hmm. Paid for by.
So anything that the so-called, I don't even want to use, anything that the authorized protesters did was total self-defense. They were attacked with bats. They were attacked with Coke cans filled with concrete. They were attacked with everything you can imagine. And they defended themselves. I'm sorry. That's all there was to it. I don't know what you've heard, but go out there and look at some live footage that's on YouTube, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. No other interpretation is possible. But it set off a nationwide, idiotic rampage that they've been tearing down, all over the country, including Texas.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it wasn't helped at all by the fake stream media.
They fanned the flames. They
fanned it.
This is one that during the 20-minute interview that you were listening to, which, as you know, is pre-recorded, I took a break to go outside and listen to the show and maybe catch up on a little email. Here's one that just came out. Vandals, they're referring to them as vandals. Sorry, these are freaking terrorists.
That's right.
They are domestic terrorists trying to tear down our history. They are ISIS. Think of them that view. When you see this going on, you're watching ISIS in this country.
Absolutely.
All right?
And the parallel between what they're doing and what ISIS is doing, like you were saying before, wow.
A bust of Abraham Lincoln has been torched in West Englewood, a suburb of Chicago, Illinois.
Really?
In the midst of anti-Confederacy monument hysteria sweeping the nation, not even America's beloved 16th president, who issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862. If you dumbasses don't know what that means he freed the slaves. That freed the slaves. Oh, this guy went on to say it in case. Is safe from mayhem and destruction. Chicago Alderman Ray Lopez says vandals torched a bust of Abraham Lincoln that stood in West Englewood for nearly 100 years. And it goes on and it goes on. And, you know, Illinois is the land of Lincoln. I mean, this is just one example. So, let me give you... it's just driving me crazy. I just got the 2-minute mark.
You got my mind boiling.
Condoleezza Rice. If you don't know who that is, look it up. She is a very eloquent, well-spoken, well-educated former Secretary of State for George W. Bush, and she happens to be black. All right?
National Security Advisor as well, yes.
Right. She isn't afraid to talk about America's history, the good and the bad. She was on Fox and Friends and was asked point blank by Brian Kilmeade how she squared up with all of this. And her response was, you know, that she should start taking their statues down and say, we're embarrassed by you. And Condoleezza Rice said, in a word, no, I don't agree with it. But I'm a firm believer in keeping our history before you. So I don't actually want to rename things that were named for slave owners. I want us to have to look at those names and realize what they did, and we're able to tell our kids what they did, and for them to have a sense of their own history.
You go, girl.
You know, we have to.
That's right.
And Governor Abbott has said the same thing. But it's sweet. I mean, it's going on everywhere. And they're removing these monuments between midnight and 5 a.m. They did it in New Orleans, and they just did it somewhere
Baltimore.
In Baltimore.
Middle of the night.
In the middle of the night, right after Charlottesville. This crap has got to stop.
Yes.
And I don't mean the riots. There's not much you're going to be able to do between two sides of ignorance that are going to decide to have a fight. And you know that from your high school days. But the attempt to destroy our history has got to stop. Learn your history. The war between the North and the South was about tyranny. It was not about slavery.
That's right.
It had very little to do with it. It was about the tyrannical... Rut-row. Time to go. You have been listening to the Doc Owen Show. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. Now go out there this week and take care, pay attention, and God bless.
Bye-bye, folks. God bless.